Hello, Cynthia.
Hello again.
Hello again.
Yes.
Hi, Stephen.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Oh, hi, Stephen.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. I don't know who said that.
Cynthia,
Oh, Cynthia.
how are you doing?
Fine.
Good.
Nice to see everyone.
Yes.
Hello, Barbara.
Hi.
Hello.
I'd love to know who a kosher kitchen is. Do you think they could reveal themselves?
Oh,
No.
no.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
How are we doing?
Good
Good,
evening.
thank you. Good evening.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Be sure. What's the news in Belmont, people? What's the news?
Sure to be sure.
Just having a quick scan because I invited St John's Wood, but I don't think anyone came. It's a long way.
Their loss, Rabbi.
Yeah, not only because I didn't really invite them. They we joined their last term.
1 minute, I'm doing something.
Oh,
Melinda, was that to me or was that to
No.
Russell? That's okay. We've all done it.
Sorry, Rabbi. I apologize. I thought I was muted.
Don't worry, don't worry. You could have said something much.
Halavai, Melinda.
My apologies.
It's okay. No, we were invited to join St John's Wood in the last term for one of the sessions. So I had a request yesterday. Could they join one of ours? So I said sure. But by the looks of it, they've lost the way. Anthony, we should send them directions next time.
yes, yes.
It's the snow, you know.
What'd you say?
It's the snow. It's snowing in Jerusalem.
Yes, it is. But they're in St John's Wood. I thought you were going to say there was traffic on the A41, which is why they're late. But it's okay.
Yeah.
We don't need them. We will enjoy it. I'm sure if any of them want to join us, they'll join us. So are you guys ready?
Yep.
Good.
Yes.
Good. So this second season of Matmid, I'm sorry about last week. It's boring, but I had some dental surgery, which wasn't supposed to take place on Wednesday. I thought it was just an assessment. And the guy said, "No, let's do it." I'm like, so I couldn't really speak on Wednesday. So I apologize for not turning up last week, but it's okay. This is what I wanted to cover. So this second season, the second term is Kashrus. We're only going to get a couple of shirim in Kashrus, but I might extend it and do a bit more because so many great topics. And I thought a great place to start would be that kind of the most common shaila question that I get as a rabbi when it comes to like kashrus, you know, that kind of help rabbi, I've triefed up my kitchen. Now, let me ask you all the following question for those of you that are familiar with how I speak of these instances, these kind of freak moments. They often actually come from a whimpering husband, and my wife is absolutely livid because I took the Purav chopping board and I used a milky spoon that is only designated for Tuesdays, and you know, and I used it on a Wednesday, and you know, so true story. Sort of. I've taken out some of the factors to make it anonymous. No, but these are true stories. I want to ask you two questions. Number one, when you ask a rabbinical authority, a rabbi, whoever, a kashrus question, how often does that answer come back as asur, prohibited, you must never do it, or it's probably fine? And the second question is, this is what I'm posing to the audience as an introduction, what are the questions the rabbi, or whoever you're asking, it might be Google, what are the questions that they'll ask you back? For example, you'll give a little scenario and they'll say, I need more information. What are those questions? Anyone want to offer, just as a way of introduction?
Okay,
Liz
first of
Rindle.
all,
Sorry, Graham. Liz had her hand up.
oh, sorry, beg your pardon.
Was the food involved hot or cold?
Oh, excellent. Was the food hot or cold? Yeah. I thought you were going to say, how hungry were you when you made the mistake? No. Okay, good. How was the food hot or cold? Graham, sorry, go for it.
I was going to say most of the well, depending on the shilas,
Okay.
most of them would say, most of them will probably paskin that it's okay.
Oh, right. Help Rabbi, I've chafed up my kitchen usually results in lots of shalom bias. Baruch Hashem, right? Because actually this, that, we use the yeshiva shatams. Okay, good. So you answered different questions. Graham answered that. They usually come back, it's okay. And Liz says, is it hot? What other questions would the rabbi ask? Come on, I know some of you have asked questions before.
How much, if it's a question of food, some food falling into other food, what were the proportions?
Oh, exactly.
Did the cold food fall into hot food, or did the hot food fall into cold food? Yeah.
Okay, good, excellent. There's one more important question that you usually get asked by the rabbi.
How long is it since you used the?
Is it possible to replace the items?
Oh, okay. So we had Graham and Linda agreeing on the when was it last used, and Liz, which you know, the most important question: how expensive was it? Right? Was it your great auntie Trudy's 1627, knife sharpening power splendor Kenwood? It's irreplaceable. No. Okay. So we get the idea, right? Anyone else want to throw anything to the mix? So, right, that was good. I wanted to see. So my intention today is to put you guys in the driving seat. This is a share, right? This is not a Q&A. This is not actually, I've got a list of things. I don't want it to be that way. And we're going to try and make it practical in the sense that, just to touch on this, but people spend years really trying to delve into these topics. I've taken this evening one topic, and the topic I've called in Hebrew is Noisein Ta'am Lifgam. Ta'am, flavor, right, that is absorbed or given or put into a food or a food item, Lifgam, to its detriment. What is the halachic, what is the religion, what is the Jewish, perspective of that food item? I'm going to explain all of this. That's what we're going to focus on today. It's called Noisein Ta'am Lifgam, or if you want to be posh about it, Nutlap, to be yeshivish, right? In Gemara language, right? Nutlap, Noisein Ta'am Lifgam. That's what we're going to look at today. And some of the things you raised, we're not going to look at. So we're not really going to look at hot or cold. We're going to assume everything we're dealing with is hot. Because if you take a piece of cold cheese and put that on your meaty plates, all you've done is upset someone else in the house, right? You haven't really ruined anything because it's all cold, and cold in a general sense, and I'm really overgeneralizing now because we have to focus, cold in a general sense doesn't transfer flavor, doesn't absorb, all right? Baruch Hashem, because that saved a lot of marriages. That's the first thing. So we're not going to look at hot, cold. We're going to assume everything we're talking about today is hot. And the other thing we're not going to touch today, Graham mentioned, is this idea of batul b'shishim. This idea that if a very small amount, if everyone just mute themselves, that'd be wonderful. Am I getting like a ticking?
Sorry, I'm in another Zoom meeting. Speak to you again. Bye.
Oh, great. So batul b'shishim. So there's an idea that if a very small amount of food drops into a much bigger amount of food, that small amount of food might be completely nullified because it's a minimal amount. We call that batul b'shishim. That's 1 in a 60th. So if you've got a nice big cholent, and you very accidentally and rather innocently swing your coffee around, and a little bit of drop of that coffee, that milky coffee, falls into the cholent, and it's really, really mamash, only less than a 60th, we say that's fine. So we're not going to talk about that today, right? These are huge principles. We're going to focus on a much more common and a much more relevant, and you're going to see how this all takes shape. We're going to talk about, again, Noisein Ta'am Lifgam. I'm repeating it because it helps if I use the actual language of the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch in how we're going to paskin, how we're going to end to that great result. So that's my introduction. Hopefully next week, or actually it's in 2 weeks because next week's Purim. Lisa's giving Purim shir on Monday by Rebbetzin Mayan, Lisa Levine. I'm not sure if you've heard of her. She's the real deal. That's Monday night Purim shir. So in 2 weeks, I want to look at the other side of the ta'am, the flavor thing, and that's going to be nut bar nut, which is about more like para food and how that food is absorbed and how food absorption weakens over time. That's a different topic. Right, so what am I talking about? For those of you that had the sheets, it doesn't matter if you haven't printed it out because I'm going to share my screen. Let's look at the Gemara. I'm going to get this. I haven't actually brought a lot of sources because I didn't want to overly confuse things, all right? So if you can have a look at your screen, there's one fundamental piece of Gemara that we need to look at to understand this topic, and that's the Gemara as follows. And we're going to learn so much from this Gemara. We're going to learn what the Torah says, what the Gemara says, what Halacha says, and then what we say. Okay, we're going to train that along. So here we go. Says the Gemara, right? Vahatanya, it is taught. We learn the following. Echad noten ta'am lifgam. The words noten ta'am lifgam in bold here. What do they mean? Noten ta'am is no saying ta'am. It's flavor that is imparted, a flavor that gives off. Lifgam, pagum is a blemish, right? Or in this case, to its detriment. So a food that is prohibited, an illegal food. Let's just go with pure and simple treif. Treif foods that will be a detriment to the permissible food. We must be talking about, at some point, a food that we can eat, right? So let's just say you've got treif food that is rancid, it is bad, that is mixed with food that is permissible. That's one case. Ve'echad noten ta'am l'shvach. And you have another case where you have a illegal, prohibited food that is mixed with a permissible food, and it actually improves it. In both cases, it's prohibited. That's Divrei Rabbi Meir. So again, you've got two cases, Rabbi Meir says. Either the cases, your treif food improves the food, that's for sure asur, that's prohibited. Or you've got the other case, noising ta'am lifgam, that the food that is permissible has to it added a treif piece of food that is going to be to the detriment. It's actually going to be not good. It's inedible. It's going to be, both of those cases, asur. Now, if I was to ask you, does that make sense? You're going to tell me, yeah, that makes sense, right? Treif food that gets mixed into kosher food, whatever the outcome, however good or bad it's going to turn out, it should always be asur, correct? That's Rabbi Meir. Comes along Rabbi Shimon in the third line, he says differently. Rabbi Shimon Omer, l'shvach, in the same case, where the treif food falls into your cholent, your kosher cholent, if it improves the flavor, so you've got a nice bit of bacon fat that goes into the cholent, we're not talking about 1/60, we're talking about a mushroom, talking about a piece of food. L'shvach, if it improves the flavor of the cholent, asur. Aval ifgam, if it makes the food taste worse, mutar. It is allowed. Mutar. It's very important. This is going to be a fundamental piece of this Gemara that's going to work its way into halacha. Once again, noisein ta'am nifgam. It's those three words I'm going to keep repeating. I'm going to brainwash you with these three words. Noisein ta'am nifgam. You're going to show off to all your friends with this, right? Noisein ta'am nifgam. When a food that is actually prohibited would make a kosher food, if added to it, worse, it's to its detriment, says Rabbi Shimon, mutar. Now the juicy stuff. Not literally, right? Now the good stuff. Why? Why does Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir say what they say? Because from here, we're going to learn so much about how to paskin the halacha. So the Gemara first says, my time, and what is the reason? For Rabbi Meir. Why does Rabbi Meir say in all cases, it's not allowed? And that, by the way, that misvara, that from just logic, our own kind of thought process, any treif at any point in time should always be asur. That's how I would like, that's how I would like to say. The Gemara says otherwise, according to Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Meir says, no, it's always asur. What's the reason? How does he learn that? What does he say it from? Gamar, he learns it from the immersion, from the purging, from the koshering, let's say, of the non-Jewish vessels. Now, I'm going to speak out what the Gemara alludes to here. The Gemara is alluding to a case in Torah. You will remember in the parsha of Matot, in the end of the book of Bamidbar, Bnei Yisrael go to war with Midian, with the Midianites. And they come back from the war, having won it, and they collected all the bounty, all the booty. And they get a lot of these pots and pans and vessels of the Midianites. Remember, they've escaped slavery. They're spending all this time in the desert. And as they go along the way, they need to amass stuff. And one of the things that they get from the war of Midian are their pots and pans. Quite useful. But the Torah specifically, Moshe tells them specifically, did I bring the pasuk? I think I brought it in the second source. Right, the verse tells us in that parasha, Kol davar asher yavo be'esh, ta'aviru be'esh, all the pots or pans that were absorbed their flavor with fire, You shall pass them through fire. You have to kosher them. And it says by water, by water. Okay, that's the koshering process, not focusing our share on that today. So it says, Rabbi Meir in the Gemara. You see what happened with the war on Midian? Bnei Yisrael come home, they take all the pots and pans, and straight away Moshe says, stop, don't use any of their pots. You have to kosher everything. You have to kosher it. And therefore, that kosher process is were those pots and pans not in a status of noisein ta'am lifgam, meaning, and we have to explain this, and this needs sort of explain, and I'm bringing in lots of stuff that the Gemara doesn't say, that the Mefarshim, the people that explain the Gemara say, but this is just to keep it simple for now. They explain as follows: a pot that is clean but was used for cooking, right? It was used for hot foods, absorbs the flavor. Let's just use a nominal figure. X amount of time passes. The absorbed flavor has a definition of lifgam. It's blemish. It doesn't impart any goodness. It's not food. It's there. The flavor is still absorbed into the pot, but whatever is there is pogum. It's not. You can't eat it. You can't benefit from it. It's not a good flavor. And even so, even though that it's not an actual flavor, it's just an absorbed, long time absorbed flavor. Says the pasuk, says the verse, says Moshe Rabbeinu to Bnei Yisrael, you have to kosher it, even though that flavor is long ago used, it's long ago absorbed. For Asur Rachman, the Torah forbids them using it. Hachanami says, Reb Shimon, here in our case, Loshna, there's no difference. Meaning, once again, Rabbi Meir says, if in the case with the Midianite vessels, they brought home their pots and pans, and it must have been, the assumption of the Gemara is, it must have been that they weren't used that day. It must have been a few days ago. The absorbed flavor, which has a definition of noisein ta'am lifgam, it has a definition of a rancid, non-positive impact on the food, and still they had to kosher their pots and pans. That was usher there. Therefore, it shouldn't be allowed over here. Is anyone with me? No. Yes? Ask now or forever hold your peace. Anyone want to ask a question? Okay, good. Okay, good. I'll take that as a relatively good sign. But it's complicated.
Yes, I have a question. What is a flavor?
Oh, but what do you mean?
What do you mean by a flavor? A flavor is, in my mind, a sensation rather than the substance.
Someone else. Sorry, I can't hear you because there's noise coming from you or somewhere else, and it could be at someone else. Keep talking.
Okay, it's David. I'm asking, what do you mean by a flavor? Since you seem to be distinguishing it from a food, whereas I would imagine that a flavor was something which is a sensation, like a smell or an image on my eye when I see things.
No, we're talking about food.
You're not. You're saying it's not a food. You said earlier that it wasn't a food.
Well, a flavor that is absorbed into a pot, that's the question. Is it a food or not a food? So
exactly. There
was one opinion that says, no, that everyone here, when I say everyone, this is an expression. Thank you for your question, Dave. Everyone in this Gemara, and pretty much across the halachic spectrum, accept the fact that a food, when it is cooked in heat, whether that be fire heat or liquid heat, is absorbed into a flavor, whatever that means. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean we can see it ourselves. If you cook a chicken soup into a pot, there will be flavor, halachic flavor, absorbed into that pot. A period of time will pass, and that flavor will still be absorbed into the pot. The question is that flavor going to add to any future food that will be cooked in that pot? Or is it going to detract from any, or not be a positive enhancement, or it won't enhance a future food cooked? That's what we're talking about. The idea of noisein ta'am lifgam, the fact that the ta'am, the flavor that has been absorbed is going to be lifgam, it's going to be bad for the food going forward. That is a status of a pot that has food absorbed from it a long time ago. So if you take a chicken soup pot and 2 hours later, even though you've cleaned it out, it's still going to be freshly chicken souped. 2 weeks later or 2 days later, that there won't necessarily be so much essence of the chicken soup that was left in that pot. It's all clean. We're not talking about, if there's actually chicken in there, that's a problem. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the status of what happens to that pot once it has been used. So yes, we're not talking about actual food. We're talking about what's the status of that absorbed flavor, ta'am. That makes sense? If it doesn't, please ask again. Cynthia's waving at me. Cynthia, you have to unmute, darling.
Doesn't this follow? Isn't this a similar premise to the whiskey being in different barrels?
Let's not go to whiskey today.
Oh.
excellent question. We can go to whiskey at the end of this year in the form of drinking it. Whiskey is, but just to say, yes, there's going to be a principle behind the whiskey. You know, you get those bottle of sherry cask whiskies that taste delicious. Why on earth should we allow them? So this is a part of that. It's cold, it's different, but there's still flavor. Good question for a different share. Okay, maybe we'll do a share on that as well. I want to go on. If it's not clear, please.
Does a pot at this stage, are we bothered about whether it's a metal pot or pottery pot? Or
okay, also good question. Well, just assuming now we're dealing with a pot that can absorb flavor, like a metal a metal pot. Okay, thanks, Judy. I'm glad we're good. I'm glad some things that are just a given for me, clearly, because I'm in it. But yes, we're dealing. I want to keep everything really simple, but that's another question that would definitely be asked. What kind of pot or vessel was it using? Was it metal? Was it not metal? We're dealing with, at the moment, we're dealing with metal pots that absorb flavor. So there's, again, this idea of noisein ta'am lifgam. So I'm going to repeat it 100 times because it's such an important terminology in the halacha here of kashrus. Noisein ta'am lifgam, an absorbed flavor that does not give a positive, it's detrimental to what's going forward. That is, according to Rabbi Meir, always a problem. And according to Rabbi Shimon, which we're going to get to in a second, it's permissible. So the Gemara says, one second. Rabbi Shimon that said it was permissible, how does he learn the story of Moshe and the Midianites, right? The Torah said, no, they take the pots home and they were told to go and kosher them. If there was no actual flavor there, why does he permit it? But they still had to kosher it. How can Rabbi Shimon permit those vessels? So the Gemara says in Rabbi Shimon, so he holds like Reb Huna. Reb Huna Brei Rav Chia Da'amar Reb Huna Brei Rav Chia. Here we go. Loi asru Torah, in the case of the Midianites, what was the problem? Ela Kedera Bas Yoma. The Lolif Gamhu. What was the scenario that the Torah is talking about? What happened over there in the case of the Midianites? That they were cooking their pork stews on that Wednesday morning. And the battle happens, and they collect up all the pots and the pans. And that afternoon, the Yidden, Bnei Yisrael, want to go home and make their chicken soup. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu tells all the Bnei Yisrael, go and kosher your pots. But says Reb Huna, this is how Rabbi Shimon learned, says Reb Huna, if it had been a day later, no problem, they wouldn't have had to kosher their vessel. So we have a machlokes, a disagreement between how you learn what happened over there with the Midianites. But either way, the Gemara is going to have this machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir about this concept of noisein ta'am lifgam. Rabbi Shimon, therefore, says, how do I allow it? What is this idea that a food that is prohibited, that imparts a bad flavor onto a permissible food, is not asur anymore? It's not prohibited. So you have your treif that gets mixed with your kosher. It doesn't add to it. It can only detract from it. It's going to be edible. That's essentially what Rabbi Shimon says. How does he get that? He gets it from a pasuk. There's a verse in the parasha of Re'eh in the book of Devarim that specifically says, in terms of a nevela, what is a nevela? A nevela is a kosher animal that was killed or died in a non-kosher way. We know we need shechita, we have a cow. We know to eat the kosher cow has to be shechted in a way in which is permissible for us to eat. If that cow dies of natural causes, or was killed in a non-kosher way, or there was no shechita, whatever it is, what do you do with that? It's called nevela. What do you do with it? You should not eat the nevela. What do? You give it to a ger. A ger here, by the way, is not a convert. A ger is a stranger, i.e. a non-Jew. Anything that is called nevela, it's not kosher. You should give it. You should not eat it yourself. You should give it to a non-Jew. Says the Gemara, Kol harui leger kori nevela. She'ein roi leger einu kori nevela. Any food that is called nevela, and nevela, as we said, is a piece of kosher meat that is not kosher because of how it was killed. That, because it's called a nevela, that should go to be eaten by a non-Jew. But if that same food, for whatever reason, does not have a shame, does not have a name of nevela, then that will be permissible for us to eat. Meaning that now piece of treif meat, if it is unedible, if it is not an actual food that even a non-Jew would eat, that becomes permissible for us. What am I talking about, people? I want to keep us all together. I'm going to keep it very, very simple. We've got a pot. That pot was used to cook treif. It's not a kosher pot. You can't use it. It's still hot. You take it out. You give it a really, really good clean. There is no remnant. There's no residue. There is no bits of treif in it. It was cooked that morning. You've now got it that afternoon, right? There's two opinions as to how we view that pot. One opinion is it will always be asur to use that pot until it's koshered. There's another opinion that says, actually, once that pot has been left for a period of time, the absorbed flavor, that ta'am, is what we call pogum, lifgam, and it detracts from any future food that will be put in there. Once that period of time has passed, it is totally permissible for us to use. Is that last sentence clear? Because that's the kicker, that's the key. The noisein ta'am lifgam is the time that is taken for that absorbed flavor to no longer be a good thing for that food. So if you want to take a pot from your non-Jewish neighbor that they haven't used in X period of time, and you want to cook in it without koshering it, according to this opinion in the Gemara, one second, I'm getting a phone call from St. John's Wood, which is probably we've got no one in it. Not sure, but they've missed it now. What can we do? What was I saying? Sorry. So let's leave what I was just saying there. I want that to be a fixed line in our heads before we move on, because we've got one other issue to discuss, and then we're going to wrap it all up and then take questions. This idea that a time passed, the absorbed flavor is no longer considered a positive impact on the food. It's called pogum, it's called blemished, it's bad. It can't be good for the food, and therefore we say zemutar. Therefore we say it is okay. Now, there's one other thing that the Gemara spoke about. And the Gemara spoke about this idea of Bas Yoma. What is Bas Yoma or Ben Yoma? That day. They argued in the case of the Midianites. What did Rabbi Meir say? Rabbi Meir said, it'll be a few days, a few weeks, it still needs koshering. Rabbi Shimon says, no. The problem that it needed koshering was because it had been used that morning. Had it been used the day after, they wouldn't need koshering at all. And now I want to show you one more piece of, there we go, let me bring it back on the screen. Two more important sources in this conversation. Because the Gemara is going to say, it comes out and concludes, noisein ta'am lifgam is permissible. If you cooked kosher food in a non-kosher pot, as long as it was clean, it's permissible after the fact. I'm going to explain this. The condition is it has to have had time between the cooking from the non-kosher food to the cooking of the kosher food. What am I talking about? Let's look at this Rashi. Rashi on this idea of Bas Yoma. Rashi is going to represent one side of the argument. What is this idea of Bas Yoma? Bas Yoma literally means a day. So Rashi says, Shebishul bar oived chachavim hayom, that the Midianites would have used their pots in the morning. Aval bishul bar etmol, had they have used the food, cooked the food the day before, kvar hafig bar ta'amo belinat laila, bolded it there, belinat laila. All that you need is nighttime to have passed, i.e., You get up in the following morning and nighttime has passed. That's what Bas Yoma means. The next day, Ki'ilu. So if you use the pot at 8 o'clock in the evening to cook your supper, you had a nice, whatever a chafe food was, as long as it's been cleaned out, left overnight, and then used the following morning, that's okay. That's already got this idea of noisein ta'am lifgam. It's pagum, it's blemished, it's not positive, it's not good for the food, it detracts from the flavor, and therefore it's permissible. That's how Rashi, Tosfos, and a lot of that side of the argument come down on. There is totally another side of the argument that says that no, doesn't agree with this, and it's the Shulchan Aruch brings that in this last source here. What does it say? Kedera shebishel ba basa loy yivashel ba chalav. A pot that had cooked meat, do not cook, or you should not cook in it milk. Ve'im bishal ba b'soich me'is le'is. If you had cooked in it meat, and straight away after, or very quickly after, you cooked in it milk, asur b'notein tam, because there's still flavor within that pot from the first cooking. V'sarich l'shar neged kol ha'kadeira, and you should take that pot and put it away from all your other pots. Leave it aside. Aval im shaham me'es le'es koydem shebishal ba. If you used it for meat and you let it aside for 24 hours in between the two cookings, or at least 24 hours, this is considered those three beautiful famous words. The food item is permissible to eat. But the pot becomes treif. So if you've got, says the Shulchan Aruch here, and this is why I need this all together. Says the Shulchan Aruch here, very, very importantly, a pot that now has not been used for 24 hours, has a status, the food has a status of noisein ta'am lifgam. Any essence or flavor that is used in that pot has become pagum, it's become lifgam, and therefore it's permissible. And that's how the Gemara learns. The Gemara learns, again, just to recap, bring it all together. I hope it's been clear. You've got to concentrate, you've got to focus. It's really difficult. And this is a comment. We should have this show at 10 a.m. A little plug for Sue's Tuesday morning shiurim, right? That we have to, 10 o'clock in the morning is a much better time to learn these complicated sugyas, so these complicated topics. But we're still going for 8 o'clock at night because it's more convenient for some people. But if we're going to take all these principles and put them all together, noisein ta'am lifgam, this idea of absorbed food not being positive, it's a pagima. That is very much.
Go on to the squares.
Hello, we're getting more people join. That is very much something. If it's been 24 hours, it is permissible. So I think that's what the Gemara says. However, right, the Torah allows it, but Chazal, our rabbis, come out and conclude in the Gemara, even though it would be permissible, even though it would be okay, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't try this at home, folks, right? Why not? In case you get mixed up, in case you actually come and eat food that was cooked in a pot on the same day, one should get into a practice of not relying on this ben yoma, eno ben yoma, on this day, same day, 24 hours period. Therefore, if you, I will come, I'm going to give you a practical example. That's what the halacha is. So let us use this very, very practically. I've got a few more halachic things we can bring up, but I want to use this very, very practically. Let me ask you the following question. Let's take a practical scenario. Rabbi, yes, I've triefed up my kitchen, right? By the way, you're all the rabbis now, so we're going to answer this based on everything we've learned until now. You're now going to answer this. Rabbi, I've triefed up my kitchen. I'm making macaroni cheese. You would never find this in my house, right? Because it's disgusting in my eyes. But let's say you've got a nice big hot, let's do something, lasagna. You've got a big cheesy lasagna. Why you would do that, I don't know. But you've got a big cheesy lasagna. And what happened? I took a spoon out of my meat drawer, shock horror, and I took the piping hot lasagna and I dug the meaty fleischig spoon into it and I was portioning it out. Chas v'shalom. Right? I'm now asking you, what questions do you want to know about that scenario? Feel free to unmute, ask away, and tell me how you're going to paskin, based on what we've learned. I want to know why. All right. If you're going to answer, I want to know why. Not just the answer, but why. Come on, rabbis. I'm giving you all smicha for the next 15 minutes. Go on, Salvador. Was that Barbara Salvador?
You didn't hear the question.
For how long that spoon had been unused?
Huh?
For how long that spoon had been unused?
Okay, so what was the question? The question is, you've got a nice big hot lasagna, a meaty spoon, right? When was the last time that spoon was used? Right, excellent. Why does that matter? So I'm going to put you in the spot, Salvador. Why does that matter? You're on mute.
Because if it had been for quite a while, it had lost the flavor and it will not enhance, or it would just be detrimental to the lasagna.
Oh, so says Rabbi Salvador Mazlia, thank you. I'm going to call you the Rabaz, right? Comes along Rabbi Mazlia and says as follows. He says, because that spoon, if that spoon, let's say, had been not used in more than 24 hours, any meat flavor that had been left in that spoon, I wanted someone to use my special magic 3-word formula that we've been brainwashing with all evening. That would be considered as noisein ta'am lifgam, noten ta'am lifgam. That would be considered a pogum in the meat, right? A blemish in the meat flavors in that spoon. And therefore, after the fact, you're not allowed to do it, but after the fact, because the Torah doesn't prohibit that, no issue would come to the lasagna. Your shalom bias is safe. Is that fair? Is that what we were trying to say, Salvador? Anyone else have any comments for me on that scenario? Graham, I can see you.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to use the spoon again.
Oh, comes along Rabbeinu Graham and says, but what about the spoon? Okay, so I'm going to ask that question. I'm going to ask another question. What if you don't know? What if you don't know? What if, and this happens, right? People, I ask, okay, when was the last time this pot was used? I don't know, right? Or even better, right? And it's very, very practical. Salvador says he reached into the drawer and you picked up a meat spoon. Now, I know that last night I had chicken soup for dinner. Last night is less than 24 hours. And I knew when I had my chicken soup, I used a meaty spoon. And I know that chicken soup was very, very hot. And therefore, I know if I use that spoon in this lasagna, we're all in trouble. But what I don't know is which out of the 250 spoons in my drawer was the one I used. You get the problem? Right? So then what do you do? What do you do when you don't know? You know that one of the, okay, maybe not 250. If you go to a rabbinic Jewish family where you tend outside COVID times to have lots of people for chicken soup on a Friday night, we've probably got at least 20 matching spoons in one size, or 20 matching spoons in another size. And I've got 4 kids. They could have used any one of those spoons. So I've got at least 40 or 50 spoons that could have been used. One of those spoons is definitely our troublemaker spoon. If that's the spoon, the lasagna is a problem. If it's not the spoon, the lasagna is fine. What do you do? Kosher all the spoons, not eat the food, throw it out? I don't know. Help. This is why you have to ask the rabbi and hope he saves your shalom bias. Yes, Graham.
On the balance of probabilities, it wasn't that spoon.
That's the accountant for you. Thank you very, very much.
But I'm a lawyer.
Lawyer, accountant. They're both a nice Jewish boy, unlike the rabbi, right? Same thing.
Isn't there another problem?
I was enjoying it.
And that is that the lasagna which was milky, has been in contact with something which is meaty. So you have corrupted the lasagna. Now it depends whether you've got a 60th or not. But if you count it perhaps as being slightly more, you've corrupted the pan as well. So you've got to do something about that, surely.
Thank you, David. Yeah, we're not dealing with 1 1/60th. I put that aside at the beginning, but you're right to think about these things. I'm glad we're training you well. It's very good. I want to know.
I knew it before.
Huh? You've heard it before. It's not new stuff. Listen, this is like 3,000-year-old halacha, so this is not new, right? We're just trying to present it in a way in which we can follow. So at least now we know next time any situation happens, write it down. So when I ask you what happened, you can tell me in good, clear format. That's why I'm doing this. I'm doing this to make my life easier, right? So here we go. Again, the meaty spoon. So the issue, 2 issues we have to deal with. What is the status of the spoon? Even if you want to say that the food's okay. So we said, if the meaty spoon that was used to take the hot lasagna, if that spoon was less than 24 hours ago, it was used for hot meat, the food is going to be a problem. Now, this is not the total most practical shear in the world, because if this was the total most practical shear in the world, we would start out trying to work out, if it's the lasagna, how much of the lasagna did it touch? And maybe there's a lot more of the lasagna that you can eat still for dinner, and your kids are starving and they're throwing tantrums and it's homeschooling. We could look at all those things, but let's just keep it really, really simple. Let's just assume now that spoon had not been used in 24 hours. Therefore, it, going back to what we learned, it is now Eino Ben Yoma. It is now not Ben Yoma. It is something that was used more than 24 hours, which means, what magic 3 words is it? Noisein ta'am lifgam, right? It's noisein ta'am lifgam. It is pagum. It can't enhance the food in any single way, shape, or form. Therefore, the food, that lasagna, you can go and have your tea. You can go and have your dinner. But says Graham, what about the spoon? If you look back to the Shulchan Aruch that we saw in that last source, it says the tavshil, the food's okay, but the pot needs to be koshered. So the spoon in that circumstance, in that scenario, needs to be koshered. That's point 1. Point 2, which is what I asked, a very valid question. What if you don't know? What if you genuinely don't know which spoon it was? So this is how we answer this. We call this, oh, Doreen, go for it, Doreen, chat. I can't see all the faces. So if you want to say anything at any point, please just unmute yourselves and shout at me.
What if the dish was glass? Because glass is supposed to be paruv.
The dish is powerful, but we're worried about the spoon. The spoon is definitely meaty or not.
But the spoon could have touched the dish as well when it went in.
Oh, it definitely could have done. But and by the way, you're asking a very good question. What if the spoon, therefore, comes in contact with the pot? If you're throwing yourself into a tizzy here, right? Because you've got a potentially meaty spoon that is actual meat going into ruining the food and ruining your pot. You've got no shalom bias left if that happens.
No, but if it's glass, then the dish isn't ruined as such.
Oh, okay. You're asking a very good thing about the status of glass. That's not this shit. So I'm gonna.
Oh, okay.
You're right. Glass in of itself doesn't absorb the flavor like a metal. That's why we're sticking to metal at the moment. But you're 100% right. Yeah. I just can't cover everything in the time that we've got today. That's why I said tonight's share is more about ideas behind one particular topic than necessarily coming away with lots and lots and lots and lots. If you want this, I can recommend some smicha courses in Israel or in various parts of the world if you want to get everything. But we can make sure on all of these things. If you want to come, if you want to listen and want to learn, I will be more than happy to prepare show on all these topics. But let's just stick to this now. We call this, if we don't know which spoon it was, but we do know there's a problem. We call this a safek sfeika, a double doubt. All right. And what do we mean by double doubt? We're dealing here in Dinei Rabbanon. We're dealing here with rabbinic decrees, because the rabbis in the Gemara that we read clearly state, according to the Torah, according to Meikar Din, they learn from Torah, this is permissible. This Eino Ben Yoma thing, right? This more than one day. Once that meaty spoon is more than a day old, if it goes into the milky food, it's not a problem, according to Torah. But the rabbi said, don't do it. But if you did it, that's now a rabbinic issue, not a Torah issue. And when it comes to rabbinic issues, if we have what we call a sfeik sfeika, 2 doubts to rely on, we rely on that to be lenient. Now, what is the sfeik sfeika in this scenario? Well, number 1, we don't know which spoon it was, which is a pretty big doubt, right? We don't know which spoon it was. It could be anyone. That's one suffix. And number 2, the other suffix is, the other doubt is, we don't know if this really was Ben Yoma or not. We don't know which spoon it was. So not only do we not know which spoon it was, we don't know if it was Ben Yoma or not Ben Yoma. We don't know if it's not Ten Tam Liv Gam. We don't know lots of things. So we rely on the sfeik sfeika. As Graham actually said, the probability is that it's not going to be that spoon. And by the time you come to next use that spoon, it's going to be okay anyway. So if you really don't know, don't worry. Don't go and kosher every spoon. What is the time? So really, I don't want to overly complicate this because I feel like it's already very, very complicated. I've tried so hard to make it really simple. That's why I've repeated myself maybe 200 times because I want to make it simple. But I'm hoping that you're starting to unpick the complexity, but also to understand why. Because I started off by asking you, when you ask a rabbi or Shiloh about something about chafing up the kitchen, more often than not, it's going to be okay. Why? Because noisem the tam lifgam. Because when you have an absorbed flavor that's been more than 24 hours, we usually say mutar. We usually say after the fact it's okay. And most things we use in the kitchen, unless you are a caterer, and that could be a different style. If you're a caterer or you're cooking like a caterer, every single day you've got hot meat food going, you've got hot milk food going, that might be an issue because this might cross-contamination might happen a lot. But in normal everyday kitchens where you're not necessarily doing all that excessive cooking all the time, most utensils you're going to have in your kitchen are going to be what we call Eino Ben Yoma. They're going to be not have been used for hot food in the previous 24 hours, and it's not likely that it would have been used to a large extent going forward the next day. And, you know, even if it is, it's usually the same pots you're using for the same things over and over again. There are several factors that we're not going to go through in any detail. It's just worth mentioning, which is why you should always still check with your local Orthodox authority if this happens at home. Number one, we haven't discussed pot covers, lids. Lids, fascinatingly enough, the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserlis, who was in Krakow, he the same time as the Ashkenazi world follow. When it comes to it's the end of the last source. I'm not going to go through it now. You can read it if you have the sheets. The Ramah says when it comes to pot covers, he wants to add a chumrah. He wants to add a stringency when it comes to them. He says because lids act differently to the rest of the pot. He wants to suggest that a lid, even if it is Eino Ben Yoma, even if it's 2 weeks old, even if it's 2 years old, it's never noisein tam nifgam. It's never permissible to use it without koshering. Why? I.e., if you have your kosher cholent and you pour the milk into the kosher cholent and you want to say that the food's going to be okay because it's noisein tam nifgam, whatever it is, if you use it with a lid, that's a bad example. Sorry. Let's just say you're cooking your kosher cholent and you put the milky lid on it. That's what I mean to say. You put the milky lid on the cholent. Shock horror. Why have you got a milky lid at home? I don't know. But let's just say you've got a milky lid at home and you put that on. The Ramah says even if that lid was used 2 weeks ago, it's still not noisein tam nifgam because a lid has a different, it sits in its own category in halacha. Why? For various reasons. Number one, the steam, that heat and intensity of the steam that forms under that lid on the base of that lid forms like a layer around it, which is different from a regular pot. Others want to suggest lids themselves are much harder to clean and there's crevices and there's crooks. So lids, says the Ramah, even though there's no real logic to it, leave it for a long period of time or whatever it might be. Like all the other pots, still you should not, one second, you should still not use the lid, even though most mainstream poskim today would allow you to use a lid. And the main reason is soap. We haven't discussed soap yet, and soap's going to be a big factor in dishwashers, which we're also not discussing today. If you're well behaved, we might come back and do dishwashers another time. But dishwashers are a whole different issue. But soap is essentially pagima. Soap is a pogrom. Soap destroys flavor. We all know that because we've all drunk or eaten something that has, at some point in our lives, leftover soap in the bottom. You know, when you go to these big functions and towards the end of the night, they've run out of glasses and you can tell they've just washed up that glass, they're giving you a glass of water. You can tell that because it tastes soapy. Soap ruins the flavor, right? Soap has a problem for us, which is a good thing because when you want to clean something, you want the soap to do its job. So soap has a pagima, it has a blemish in it that will potentially nullify the food and therefore put it into noisein tam nifgam. If you add meat and milk with soap in it, you've completely destroyed the flavor. There's no enhancement of that flavor. So soap is a whole other category, which really helps us in the kashrus world, and therefore also helped. I had a great shaila last week, came to me, a guy panicked, Shalom Bias 101. He panicked, he said, my wife is going with sugar on me. He said, I used the milky sponge to wash up in hot water in the meaty sink. Milky sponge. So that's like, in my mind, that's like my head's spinning because milky sponges is not, there's actual milky food stuck in the kind of what they called spikes. I can't think of the words. It's getting too late. You know, in the bristles, right, of the brush. That's the word, bristles. Great word. So there could be actual like bits of milk food left in those bristles. So you're actually putting milky foods into the meat. But then there's soap in there, which you can rely on. There's lots of things you can rely on. We allowed him to use everything that he'd washed up, which is fine, Baruch Hashem, even though it was hot water. So that soap's an issue. And the other thing we haven't discussed is a davar charif, right? We've been discussing hot foods in pots. What about something that is charif, something that has a sharp flavor, like an onion or garlic or a chili, right? Everything that we love to use to enhance our delicious food can cause a problem for us with kashrus, because even if it's not hot heat, it's hot, sharp flavor. And that also gives us problems in the kashrus world. So even if you want to take your cold, milky, sharp knife and use that to cut your hot, meaty food, even if that's more than 24 hours old, if that milky, cold knife was last used to cut onion and cheese together, that might be a problem. Again, I'm just highlighting the issues and giving you flavors of other shiurim that we could discuss. So to recap everything we discussed tonight, I noticed St. John's Wood came in a little bit late. Was there traffic on the A41? Is that why that was? I apologize if there was a mix-up and if it was my fault. I don't know what happened or why. And everything's been recorded if you're worried about what you missed. But we gave a shir within the Gemara, for those of you that missed the beginning, looking at to this whole idea of those three words, noisein, noten, ta'am, lifgam, that flavor it started at 8 p.m. It might have started at 8:02, but yes, it was 8 o'clock. So sorry if it was advertised as late. What was I saying? Oh, noisein ta'am lifgam. That's what the Gemara is discussing. And what is noisein ta'am lifgam? Is that that flavor, treif flavor, that will not impact the food in a positive way. In fact, it's detrimental to the food. The Gemara concludes that is permissible. So if you have it's a good example, treif food. And by the way, it's not subjective. We're not talking about Moishela over there and Yankov over there. Moishela loves bacon, Yankov hates bacon, right? Therefore, we're not saying it's subjective because he likes bacon, he doesn't like bacon. We're talking about actually improving the food or detracting from the food, regardless of whether we like it or not. We're talking about the quality of the food. If that food has been in some way, if that flavor, that tray flavor takes away, detracts from the quality of the food or cannot improve upon it, the Gemara says, Mikar Adin from Torah, mutar, and that's why we would, after the fact, allow such things. And we spoke about this idea of Ben Yoma or Eina Ben Yoma, whether it's that day or that 24-hour period or even longer. If it's more than 24 hours, it falls into the category of Eina Ben Yom, falls into the category of Noisen Ta'am Lifgam, this idea that it becomes pagum, it becomes destroyed or bad or rancid, the flavor. And again, that is mutar, that is permissible. And we also discussed, they were the main things we discussed. We talked a little about cheese and milk and hot meats and stuff like that, and pots and lids and soaps and harif. Right, that's the shir. Any questions? Or are you all just going to sit and munch on that for a few hours and think about those things we discussed? Because they could have just done a Q&A about kashrus, but then we won't learn anything. This way we can really get our teeth into the sugi. And I say next week, 2 weeks time, I apologize, 2 weeks time, we're going to be learning, I think, about para food. We didn't discuss that now. What if you cook a cake in a meaty oven? All right, so you used you've done your Shabbos cooking on a Thursday afternoon, and you've made your chicken and everything else like that. And then on Thursday evening, this might be based on a true story, your 12-year-old daughter bakes a cake. And that lovely purr of ginger cake that she bakes that makes the whole house smell delicious and therefore has to be tried. Can you eat that cake with a cup of milky tea? Right? It's a totally power of cake. So that's, I think, the subject I want to discuss in 2 weeks. Totally different from today, even though it crosses over on some of the same things. But that's then. Any questions specifically on what we've discussed tonight? Please unmute yourself and ask. Stanley, are you waving? Yeah, we can't hear you. You're either muted or there's no microphone plugged in.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, there's an easy solution. If you're saying that you used a milky utensil, then it's within the 24 hours. So you just have another meaty meal or a milky meal, what you had the previous night, and then you've got no problem. There's no argument. So then that will overtrack the 24 hours, and then the following night you can do what you like. You with me?
No.
No.
You have your milky food.
Yeah. You have a milky meal, and you've used a meaty utensil. So the thing is, the following night, you have another milky meal, and you don't use any meaty utensils. So you're leaving it to rest, and then the following night you can do what you like because it's over the 24 hours.
But you've already done it. You've already done it.
Oh,
that's the.
Oh,
Yeah.
if it's a fair company, I can't help you.
That's when you call the rabbi.
Yeah, you'll have to choose another rabbi. I'm not qualified.
Sorry. So anyone else have any other questions?
Can you put it in again now? Because I can't hear it.
Hello. Me.
Hello.
You haven't actually defined what you mean by hot, except in the case of, in the
Excellent
case
question.
of spicy food.
Excellent question. That's sheer 76. I'll answer your question. I'll answer your question very, very simply. Very, very simply. Again, this is why I can't do myself out of a job, right? I can't give you all the answers. I have to say something for myself. But very, very simply put, we have a concept called Yad Soledespo. Yad Soledespo means that if I go to touch something and I draw my hand back really quickly because it's hot, we've all had that scenario, the bath water or, I don't know, a soup, or you go to touch something and Yad Soledespo, you're going to literally remove your hand very quickly. That is the finger test to how hot something is. That's the heat we're talking about. So my sort of go-to question that helps people when I say, were you washing up in hot water? Yes, it was very hot. Were you using gloves? And they say, no, I'm not using gloves. That tells me it's not Yad Soledespo. It can't be hot enough. If you were using your marigolds, we might have a problem. So I always encourage people to not use rubber gloves when they're washing up, because that way your water isn't going to be too hot. Because again, that's another issue. So does that help? So that's going to be a difference between a piping hot lasagna. Also, and also, again, it gets so complicated because there's also something, and this crosses over with the Shabbos halachas, is right. There's also something called iroi. Iroi is pouring, meaning, let's say my chicken soup, my piping hot chicken soup, is in the pot, and how does the soup get to the bowl? We use a ladle. So I put normal, right? We use a ladle. So you put your piping, it's bubbling on the stove. This is a Tuesday night. Your chicken soup left over from Friday night. It's always good to eat until the middle of the week, right? You take your chicken soup, bubbling hot with a ladle. Now, already in that ladle, it's now halachically cooler and practically cooler than it was in that pot under the flame. It now gets transferred into a bowl. We call that a kli shlishi. It's twice removed from its source. Kli rishon, the vessel is in its boiling water. The ladle is now a second vessel. The bowl is now a third vessel. By the time that spoon hits the chicken soup, you could argue that might not be Yad Soledespo, couldn't you? You could argue that soup has now been transferred 3 times. That spoon essentially is now a fourth vessel. So it's removed from its original heat source. That's why, as I said, you need like years of learning to get through all of these topics, because, you know, you need like a computer system to like put in all the different things. But that's a very brief summary of how hot is hot. But an excellent question. Thank you, David. Any other questions? Bernard?
Yeah. Years ago, the old people from the Heim, from Lithuania, used to say, if you've used a spoon or any utensil meat instead of milk, you put it in, stick it in the sand for 24 hours, and then you can use it.
That's a whole different topic. We're not going through that now. Good question, but we're not talking about that now. I can't do it all. Any other questions?
Can I ask one, please?
Sure. So what's Norman?
Norman, yeah.
You can ask me what time we started this year.
When you put the meaty spoon into the lasagna, yeah. What is the status of the meaty spoon after it's been in the lasagna?
Oh, excellent question. So, are you assuming?
Sorry, I hope it's not a stupid one, but
Well, no, not a stupid question. Did I say no? Excellent question. I just want to check what your question is. Are we suggesting, according to your question, because every scenario has to be very specific to get the right outcome?
Right.
Are we suggesting that according to your question, what status is the spoon?
It was a meaty spoon that you were not sure because there were 20 or 30 spoons there.
Right.
But you put it into the lasagna, and then you realized that it was a meaty spoon.
Mm-hmm.
So you said earlier that it depends if it was 24 hours or more than 24 hours, and then you're unsure which spoon it is. But the spoon that you actually put into the lasagna, which was a meaty spoon without any question, what is the status of that meaty spoon?
Excellent.
I hope that's clarified.
No, it's very, very clear, and I'm going to give you a Jewish answer. It depends. Okay. I'll tell you, it depends on if you know that spoon is the spoon you used.
Yeah.
Then you should kosher it.
Well, you do. You do know it's a spoon you used because you just put it into the lasagna and you've eaten it. You don't know whether it was you used that spoon yesterday or weeks ago, whatever. But you know that you put that spoon into the lasagna.
I see your question. Yes, you should kosher it. No, 1 second. So no, I'm right. We call that a speaker, right? We call that a speaker. We call that a case where we have no idea, and the likelihood is that that was not the meaty spoon that you used last night, right? And because we have no idea, we're going to use the probability that it wasn't, and we're dealing in derabbanans, we're dealing with rabbinic decrees and not Torah decrees at this level, and therefore the food is permissible and the spoon is fine. If you know for sure that was one of the spoons, then you should kosher it.
So you're saying that if you're sure it was a meaty spoon that you used within 24 hours, then it needs to be kosher.
Definitely. And the food is not permissible if you knew it was the spoon.
Right.
But if you don't know, then the food is permissible, and you should and you just put the spoon, clean it, and put it back.
Because presumably that meaty spoon has been I don't know the right word, but spoiled because you've had it in the lasagna.
It's noisein ta'am lifgam. I tried to brainwash them at the beginning about those words. We call that noisein ta'am lifgam. That any food absorbed into that spoon once it's been left for a period of time is pugum. It's not positive. It's blemished. The food itself that could be absorbed in that, any meat that was, any chicken soup that could be potentially still left in that spoon after a good period of time of 24 hours is going to be pugum. It's not going to be it's not going to be enhancing. It's not going to make that lasagna nice and chickeny.
Right.
That makes sense.
But we're not going into the question of what one does with a spoon after you put it in the lasagna.
If you're holding the spoon now and you know it's that spoon, you should kosher it.
Right. Okay.
Put it into boiling water. Good question.
Sorry. Okay. Boiling water, you say?
Yeah. To kosher again. It's not a shear on koshering, but in that scenario, you would take up a boiling pot of a clean, unused for 24-hour pot of water, and ensure the water is bubbling away. Ideally, drop the spoon in, take it out as quickly as you can somehow, and put it into cold water. And then that.
And how long does it need to stay in the boiling water for? Sorry.
Seconds.
Sorry? Seconds.
Seconds.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Pleasure. I'm sorry I wasn't clear at the beginning. Morris Minsky's way.
No, you were. You were very clear.
Just a point of observation. I know with my mother, Shalom, if there was a mix-up with cutlery, she should always put it in the earth for at least 24 hours. Which I think very much what Bernard said.
Yeah. I'm going to cover it. Someone's asked me for one of the Q&A, so I'm going to save that for a Monday night Q&A. It's a different topic for now.
Okay.
I've got to keep you guessing. I've got to keep you wanting to come back and do more. Any other questions on what we discussed tonight, or do you all just want to go and have some lasagna now?
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Not with a meaty spoon, please.
Please, not with a meaty spoon. Otherwise, after the show again. Yes, David.
All of my life, I've kept separate milk and meat pans. Are you telling me that if I actually had my hot cooking 24 hours apart, so that I cook my meat
And 24 hours later, I cook my milk, and then 24 hours later, I cook my meat.
David, you're going to get me fired.
Sorry?
You're going to get me fired.
Yes, I know that. But you might as well ask a controversial question. The simple ones are easy.
So just to be clear, it's a very important point. I'm going to use another example in halacha that maybe we can transfer to this course. We have a concept on Shabbos of mechse kamavasha, an action that looks like cooking. Are we allowed to cook on Shabbat? No, right? So the rabbis came along and said, we're worried that you might come to cook on Shabbos. So we're going to do everything in our power to ensure that you do not cook on Shabbos. So therefore, there's several gezerot, several decrees that they made that look like cooking. And because it looks like cooking, we don't let you do it in case someone walks past, sees you do it, think you're cooking, and therefore think it's okay to cook. And what does that mean? How do we explain that? So let's talk about an oven. You can't put food in an oven on Shabbos. That's what the rabbi said. But what if you want to just heat something up in an oven? What if you just want to leave your oven like I've got one of those they call hostesses, right? We've got a hostess, and the hostess sits there at a certain temperature. You don't change it up or down. Nice warm temperature, and I can put my food in it. What if I want to treat my oven like a hostess or a hot plate? I want to put it on 120 degrees or whatever it is. I'm going to not touch it. I'm going to tape it up, leave it there for all of Shabbos. And therefore, on Shabbos morning, I'm going to get up, my oven's on, I'm not going to change it up and down, and I've got my cold kugel, and instead of putting it on the platter, or putting it in the hot cupboard, or putting it in the hostess, I'm going to put it in the oven, just to warm through, so by the time it gets to lunch, I've got a nice, warm, hotish kugel. Say the rabbis, you can't do that. Why can't you do that? Because it looks like cooking. Because if Joe Schmo looks at you and sees you putting food into an oven on Shabbos, the oven, the assumption of the oven is that you're cooking, even though you know you're not cooking. It looks like cooking. So the rabbis make decrees lest bad things happen, right? Unless we come and commit averot, prohibitions, specifically the oraisa, Torah prohibitions. They make rabbinic decrees to stop us from transgressing Torah decrees, the Torah prohibitions. So I'll get my word muddled up. Same goes to our topic tonight. The sages in the Gemara learn out that a triefed pot, a pot that you buy off eBay, that was used in the local chip shop to fry the bacon bits, if you take that home and you give it a good clean and it hasn't been used in 24 hours, according to the understanding of the Gemara, it's perfectly fine. You could go ahead and do that. Come along the sages and say, we're worried it's all going to get mixed up. Therefore, don't do it. Kosher the pot first, and then you can use it. But if you happened to have done it after the fact, assuming all the pieces of puzzle can, assuming you know there's no treif in there, and you know that you haven't eaten treif, and you know it's been more than 24 hours, then after the fact, it could be okay. You can't instruct a non-Jew to do it for you, but after the fact, it's okay. So according to you, if you have those pots and you haven't used it for 24 hours and you cooked your cholent in it one day or chicken soup in it one day, and the week later you've got the same pot, can you just go and heat up your milky cheese in that pot? Again, according to the Gemara, the understanding that we had of the Gemara, it should be allowed. But the rabbis came up, the Talmudic sages said, don't do it unless you get mixed up. Don't do it. If you did it after the fact, that's basically the shilas that we deal with as rabbis, right? It happened. Now what do I do? So we have to look at the status of the food, but don't do it. Me'ikar adin, you should not be doing those things. Does that make sense, David?
Yeah.
Good.
Rabbi, you're talking about pots. Last summer, you know how people leave at the front of their houses things that for other people to pick up? There was a really, really nice barbecue.
Don't go to barbecues.
Okay. Because I was thinking, I didn't take the barbecue because I thought, I can't do that. Okay.
Barbecues it's a good question. Barbecues are totally different because the residue and the heat is intense. You can only kosher something by recreating, if not hotter, how it was absorbed in the first place. And the intensity of the barbecue means you can't really get much hotter because it will just melt everything around it. But also the residue from the actual food gets everywhere. So barbecues are very, 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 very complicated. I had a good shiler actually, and I haven't had this answered yet, even though I haven't asked necessarily everyone I want to ask. But you know, when you go to a holiday home and they have a gas barbecue, right? A gas grill, right? I would like to think that you could give that gas barbecue a really, really, really good clean, take away all their utensils, always leave the lid open. And you know those mats you get in Lakeland, you know those, you can buy like a silicone mat that you put on the grates of the barbecue and cook on that. I think you should be allowed to do that. If you leave the lid open, you kosher it out as much as you can, you clean it out, you burn it out as much as you can, you try and get rid of any triefed, anything that's been cooked on there before, and then you put one of those silicone mats down. Don't puskin this way because I haven't had this puskin yet. But as my svaras, as just me working it out, I think that should be allowed, because when you're cooking on that barbecue, the lid, you're not. If you close the lid, you'd be under trouble, right? But we're not closing the lid; we're leaving it open.
Oh,
so you're going to go down to the supermarket in Torremolinos, and you're going to go and get your freshly from the fishmonger. You're going to get your salmon from the fishmonger, and you get them to take it or make it look nice, and then you can go heat up that barbecue, put the silicone mat down, and cook on the silicone mat. I think that should be fine. But again,
you miss the smoke flavor.
When in Rome or when in Torremolinos and you need to eat salmon on a barbecue, you know, that's what you can do. Thank you for that though. Any other questions, or have you had enough for the evening? I hope that was interesting. And I hope some of it made sense. What are the 3 words? Noten, tam, lifgam. If anyone phones me with a shiler and says those 3 words in the next 2 weeks, I'll be well impressed. But don't trafe up your kitchen just to ask me those questions. So next week on Monday night, Lisa Rebbitzin Mayan, Lisa Levine is giving the Purim share. Sue, I think I'm speaking to on the lady share on Tuesday morning. Is that correct? You're looking at me thinking it's probably correct. I have it in my head. I'm speaking before Purim, and next week's Tuesday is before Purim. So I'm speaking about Purim on Tuesday morning. If anyone's interested, speak to Sue for details.
You are.
And I am.
Yeah.
I just remembered that about 3 minutes ago. Which is fine. Plenty of time to prepare for that. And that's Monday night's Purim with Lisa. Tuesday morning is Purim with me. And then it's Purim. And then the week after, we'll pick up with another kashrus topic. And that's all interesting. So that's that. Any other questions? Then feel free to be in touch. I'm sorry, St. John's Wooders. I don't know why you thought it was 8:30, but we started at 8. And I've recorded this. If anyone would like a copy, speak to Rabbi Golka and I will gladly get you a copy. Anyone from Belmont wants a copy, please be in touch. Have a lovely evening. Thank you for joining. And see you all very soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye. Thank you, Rabbi Levine.